right? So you're from another country, but you know English. And you're watching the presidential inauguration. But you're not that familiar with America. You've watched the inauguration. You've watched a couple of hours of all this stuff. What would you think about America and the political process?
Well, if you understood that it was a transfer of power, I think for many countries, they would appreciate the transfer of power and how it takes place, especially if they understood that the people had a say in who was ascending to the presidency and how they got there. So I think you would appreciate the music as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think if you explain to somebody, these folks are bitter rivals, and yet they're sitting feet from each other, and they're actually being relatively they're being relatively kind. So I think that would speak volumes.
Are we talking about the president and vice president, or are we talking about the new president? I'm sorry.
They at least weren't coming to physical blows.
If you could tell people, you should see the campaign commercials they ran against each other, and then they're willing to be seated in the same room and have conversations.
Yeah.
I would say that I would come off with the idea that they really like the color blue, because if you look over the crowd, there was just a boatload of blue in the crowd. I would also say these people pray a lot. If I'm not mistaken, at the actual swearing in, there were 5 prayers offered.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, because they had some at the beginning and then they had some at the end.
Yeah, they had 2 at the start, 3 at the end, and then they went over and had lunch, and Barry Black went ahead and did the invocation over the lunch as well. I'm thinking to myself, everywhere these people go, they stop and they pray.
Yeah. Someone did comment online, I read right before we walked in the studio, that there was a lot of reference to God and prayer, and for some reason it felt different to them this year. It was someone who'd witnessed many inaugurations. And they said it felt different this year. Like maybe there was an authenticity to it, or they know how much the country has turned to prayer in these past couple of years.
Yeah, and understanding that this is I believe, I'm looking for words to use here. This is the most elevated event in our civil government. This is above a Supreme Court decision. It's above a State of the Union address. It's above an election speech. I mean, what goes higher than a presidential inauguration? I think this is it, right? This is like the penultimate American experience in regards to celebratory, events of our government. I think so. Other than a state funeral of a president, I think the inauguration tops it all.
Yeah, well, it'd be interesting to see what happens in 26 with the 250th anniversary of the country. That'd be interesting to see if that could top it.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of something that happens all the time, I think you're right. But back to it feeling different when we're speaking about God and prayer. It's not often that you have a president who, during the campaign season, was almost killed twice, and then credits God for sparing his life. So if you can't offer a sincere prayer after that, then you might not be able to offer sincere prayer. So I think that changes things a little bit.
So it was different. It was different. Okay, and they like music. These people like music a lot.
A lot of hymns, a lot of classic hymns.
And when it comes to music, Alan said, we've all been in the room where the inauguration has taken place, and it's usually outside. It was moved indoors because of the bitter cold. And Alan said, man, can you imagine the acoustics in that room? These musicians are used to having the best. How is it different? What's it like?
Yeah.
Because we know in those rooms, some places you can whisper and hear across the way it's designed.
Well, yeah, I noticed I didn't see any in-ear monitors. Now, maybe there were some wedges on the floor or something, but if you need to hear musicians playing, and you need to sing to it, that's difficult to do.
Certainly. And as we found, Carrie Underwood was able to be innovative and trust the skills and the talents that the good Lord gave her and just lead, and God bless her. Or it was, America the Beautiful. Yeah. One verse, by memory, you all sing along. And they did.
Yeah.
That sounded pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's being prepared.
I think it's a combination of being prepared, being confident, but also being humble enough to know that's a high wire. I mean, that's going out on a high wire. not knowing, sing it a cappella, invite the crowd to sing with you.
Well, and she had to stand there for like 30 seconds at least, maybe a minute.
Oh,
just wait.
I'm feeling like it was getting into the 2:30, man. Alan,
yeah.
I'm dying. I'm sweating my shirt watching it.
Well, hey, I'm an audio guy. I'm dying.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh no, someone's getting fired. No, I'm like, no.
Oh, somebody's gone.
Yeah. Audio
You better
guys
have a
unite.
government pension. Yeah, if that was an outside contract, oh boy. Yeah. But everybody kept their cool. It was pretty interesting. So okay, we've been through that experience. A lot of people didn't have a chance to see it, and we're going to be talking about things and the nuance that they still won't be able to replay because you won't get the replay. There was some subtle stuff in here that I think that was very significant. The iciness between the parties was not ameliorated, certainly. I'm certain that it can't be in an event like this. I don't know that it was aggravated at a heightened degree, but I think that Donald Trump was unavoidably aggravating to people who were sitting across from him on the aisle. I did have to, just some nuances, though, that if you do get a chance to watch the replay, why is it that George W. Bush, even at this advanced stage in his life in years, always looks like he just got away with something and he thinks the teacher is going to find out? The look on his face is always like, I won't tell if you won't tell. Did you notice?
Yes. Yeah. 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 I think he's one that's probably been yelled at by his wife more than once in a formal setting to act right.
You just feel like a guy who knows somebody's about to yell at him and he's hoping he gets away with it. Yeah. So, okay. All right. So in regards to content, we've talked about this together, and it's hard to know if the speech actually has any impact whatsoever on what's going to happen, other than the fact that the president was pretty clear in telling us the kind of executive orders he was going to sign. I can tell you that I can remember inaugurations where executive orders meant nothing. This is a recent phenomena. This was not something that was happening in a generation ago in the presidency. This is something that is a direct response to a recalcitrant, entrenched Congress that will not accept leadership from presidential administrations, no matter whether they're Republican or Democrat, and who controls the House and Senate. So this is a real sign of how deeply divided our government is.
Do you expect this one to be any different? Do you expect him to sign the executive? Okay. Yeah.
No, I think he'll sign a whole bunch of them.
As we're sitting here right now recording this broadcast, he's signing executive orders right now. And so it'll just be interesting to see how long they last and if Congress can put any laws behind it.
It's a tough place to start. And the challenge is something that I think needs to be talked about over and over and over again. And because it's just going to sound like, well, this is my opinion, I'm going to quote or at least cite Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, who has been stating and stated on air recently that his biggest concern for the Trump administration is the institutionalists who firmly believe that Donald Trump is a threat to the institution of our administrative state. And these members of Congress, House and Senate, Republican and Democrat, believe that it's their job to protect the administrative state. And therein lies the conflict and where it's going to be. And that comes as a shock to people. And this is not partisan. This is about worldview. What do you think the role of government is? Is the role of government to protect your right to govern yourself, or is the role of government to fill in the gaps for anyone who's got a complaint?
So those people are like the conservationists that are looking to protect the swamp. They don't want the swamp drained.
Yeah.
They want it to stay the same. I mean, I know, he's been talking about things such as releasing files regarding JFK and RFK and MLK and everything that relates to those assassinations. I mean,
which if there's nothing to see here, why are we afraid to release the files?
Yeah. What's the concern? The establishment. That's one thing. We talk about the country being divided when it comes to voting or to passing laws in Congress, but boy, they are pretty united when it comes to protecting the establishment at all costs.
Watching each other's back.
Yeah. And that couldn't be more out of touch with the American people.
Right.
We've talked on this broadcast many times about the broad coalition that came together and put not just Donald Trump in the White House again, but elected members of Congress, all sorts of races down the ticket. Americans want to change. They don't want business as usual. Obviously, we're working within the framework and structure of our constitutional republic. We're not trying to throw everything out, but we want to get back to basics. I think that's what people want.
Thanks for stopping by at 1850 Main Street. We're glad you're here. Do you want to learn more about what is really going on behind the scenes in public policy? Tune in to the Public Square on over 200 radio stations coast to coast, or download the free Public Square mobile app from your app store. Just look for The Lamppost. Find out what America is really talking about at thepublicsquare.com.
Well, one of the things that's interesting, Ellen, is that everywhere Amy Klobuchar went, and she was the designated person to to join with the committee chairman, the way they put the inauguration together. Everywhere Amy Klobuchar went, she carried her manual and her rhetoric to make sure that every time she had a chance to speak, she talked about our democracy. Whether it was the luncheon, whether it was at the event, everywhere she went, she talked about our democracy, our democracy, our democracy. Now, the reality is we're not a democracy. And people are used to us talking that way. But it matters. And it really matters when the Democrats are out of power. Because what they want to do is to make people believe that government is supposed to be run based on public opinion polls. And they know that what happens is after the honeymoon period, any president will begin to decline and will spend most of his term in office under 50% in popularity, just because now he's in charge, so everybody's mad. That's the way it works. It doesn't mean they won't vote for him again or her, but it just means that so then when you've got below 50% popularity, well, this is a democracy and most people disagree with you, so you better change the policy. That's always the way that the institutionalists and the Progressive Party works. That's why they want us so desperately believe in democracy. But democracy is not in the Declaration, and it is not in the Constitution. And in fact, the people that worked on those documents despise the term and that form of government. What is interesting and was surprising to me is that Donald Trump used the word republic at least twice in his speech and did not fall into the same rhetoric. Now, it's possible to make too much of that argument. I get that, because in some ways people think of this as synonymous. Well, if it's synonymous, then maybe it's not quite as dangerous, but I'm not so sure. There is a huge difference, and it is specifically in the strategy of progressives to convince every American that we live in a democracy, and we do not. We live in a constitutional republic.
I think that's what's interesting about this second term of Donald Trump, having it not being a consecutive second term, is the fact that he will be president during the 250th celebration of the United States of America. And I think he's going to do everything in his power to educate those around the country and around the world about the history of our country and take us back and have a look at some of those things on why we became a constitutional republic, why the founders despised the thought of being a democracy, on places they'd seen it fail. So that's an exciting time for all of us.
Yeah, well, and that was one thing you heard during Trump's inaugural remarks, was he talked about trying to instill pride in being an American, pride in your country again. And I think as someone who's raising kids right now, I think that's important, because a lot of times you read textbooks and they try to undercut pride in your country at all. And that doesn't mean that you can't look at things you've done wrong. But so I thought that was interesting that he very specifically mentioned pride in who our country is. So I'm intrigued as well to see how he's going to help us celebrate the 250 years.
Well, we're certainly going to be working at it here, working at it very, very hard. So I hope everyone will stay very closely tuned in with what we're doing, because there's ways that we can, just talking person to person, community to community, can have a huge impact on all of this. But I do want to touch one more thing, because it'll be talked about a lot. And, what will Joe Biden be remembered for, so on and so forth. I think the one thing that shocked me about the inauguration day, about January 20th, was that Joe Biden walked out the door of the White House. Now, you don't get back in. Okay? I mean, he walked out the door. It's not his house anymore. When he walked out, not his house. So hopefully he had a cell phone, right? So he walked out, got in the motorcade, came to the Capitol, walked in, stood in the line, came in his place in order, sat down. And then the people back in the White House, with 20 minutes left to spare in his presidency, announced all of Biden's family was pardoned. It seems like a strange ending to a movie, doesn't it?
Yeah, them, along with January 6 committee members, along with so many others that he offered the list up. The thing that gets me about it is Joe Biden in December of 2020 talked about this being a dangerous precedent to set if Donald Trump was to do what Joe Biden in essence did. Adam Schiff said the same thing.
That's remarkable. Well, and we talked throughout this whole process that I'm surprised Biden even made it this far, remained president this long. I'm surprised his health held out. God bless. I'm glad it did. I'm surprised on one level they didn't just swap out the candidates. So you wonder if there was almost some sort of a backroom deal, like you get to pardon everybody you want to pardon, and I don't know. It just seemed like that's what he was still there to do.
It's just a weird ending to the movie. It's just a weird ending to the movie.